I get it, you're staring at a whole aisle of monitors and recorders, and the thought of dropping a few $100 on something that ends up gathering dust is a real gut punch. You've probably seen ads promising studio-grade HDR and instant 4K capture, but you're wondering if any of that actually translates into a smoother day on set or a cleaner workflow at home. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. So let's break down whether the Atomos Shogun 7 lives up to the hype and if it's the right fit for the kind of shooting you do. First off, the Shogun 7 is marketed as an all-in-one solution. A 7.2-inch monitor that's bright enough to read in daylight, a recorder that can take ProRes RAW straight from your camera, and a little switcher that lets you toggle between sources without having to reach for a laptop. That's a lot of functionality squeezed into a size that's meant to sit on a rig, not in a bag. If you've ever been stuck on a location where the sun is blinding you, or you've had to swap SD cards mid-shoot because you ran out of space, this kind of integration can feel like a lifesaver. What makes the monitor side stand out is the 1500 nit brightness and the dynamic Atom HDR 360 zone backlight. In practice, that means you can actually see the shadows and highlights on a sunny rooftop without squinting, and the HDR preview is close enough to the final image that you can trust what you see on the screen. I've seen cinematographers on indie sets use the Shogun 7 to double-check exposure while the sun is high, and they report that the real-time HDR preview saves them from pulling the same take twice because the image was too flat on a regular monitor. For anyone who works in uncontrolled lighting weddings, outdoor documentaries, even run-and-gun music videos, that brightness and HDR fidelity are not just nice-to-have. They're practical tools that keep you moving. On the recording side, the Shogun 7 accepts 4K video in a range of codecs, including Apple ProRes RAW. The big benefit here is that you can record directly to an SSD without needing an external recorder box. In a typical day of shooting, you might change lenses 3 or 4 times, and each time you can keep the same external drive plugged in, reducing the number of cables and the chance of a loose connection. The real-time Dolby Vision HDR output is also a plus if you're delivering content that needs to meet streaming platform standards. Your monitor can actually display the Dolby Vision signal you're capturing, so you can spot grading issues on the spot instead of discovering them in post. But there are trade-offs that become evident once you start using the unit for longer periods. The 7-inch screen, while bright, is still relatively small for precise focus pulling on a 4K frame. On a wide-angle shot, you might find yourself leaning in more than you'd like, which can be uncomfortable on a rig that's already cramped. Some users who work with larger sensor cameras say they prefer a 10-inch monitor for that extra real estate, especially when you need to see focus peaking at the pixel level. If you're the type who likes to keep everything within a single handhold, the size is a sweet spot, but if you regularly need a bigger canvas for color grading checks, you might end up pairing the Shogun 7 with a secondary monitor anyway. Another practical point is the battery life. The Shogun 7 runs off a standard Sony mount battery, and while it does offer a decent runtime, you'll notice a drop once you start recording in ProRes RAW at higher bit rates. In a day shoot that stretches beyond 8 hours, you'll probably need a spare battery or a power bank. That's not a deal breaker, it's just something you have to plan for. I've heard of filmmakers who keep a small 5000 mAh USB-C pack on the belt and run the Shogun 7 off it when they're on a gimbal that doesn't have a dedicated power output. It works, but it adds another piece of gear to manage. Now, who should actually consider buying the Shogun 7? If you're a solo filmmaker, a wedding videographer, or a documentary shooter who needs to stay light on your feet while still capturing high-quality HDR footage, the Shogun 7 hits a sweet spot. Its ability to record directly to an SSD means you can eliminate a recorder box, saving both weight and setup time. The HDR preview and Dolby Vision output are real advantages for anyone delivering to streaming services that demand those specifications. And because it doubles as a switcher, you can connect a secondary camera or a playback device and toggle without breaking your flow, perfect for interview setups where you want to switch between a camera feed and a playback screen on the fly. On the flip side, if you're a high-end cinema professional whose workflow already includes a dedicated recorder, a larger monitor, and a separate switcher, the Shogun 7 might feel like a compromise. The screen size could be a limiting factor for precise focus, and the integrated